Welcome everybody to the second appointment with the Emerald webinar series. This is Maria Letizia Mari from Trust IT. With me, the speakers of the webinar, and Foivos and Galatoulas, who is the project coordinator, who will present the agenda and all the speakers. Just a few tips from my side. Let's say a few technical points. The webinar will be recorded. So will be shared also in the recorded version on our channel, so on the Emerald's website and also on the YouTube channel. The slides of the presentation will be shared after the webinar. And please, during the webinar, if you have questions, put them and type them in the Q&A box that you can see below on your Zoom screen at the bottom of the display of your screen. So I give the floor to Foivos Galatoulas, project coordinator for this navigating AI's ethical aspects, which is the topics and the title of this webinar. Foivos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria Letizia. Welcome to all participants, online participants in today's webinar, the second in the series of the Emerald Project's webinars. Today, the topic that we are discussing and exploring is the navigating AI's ethical aspects, particularly from the scope of the Emerald Project and how we address and manage ethical considerations within the project. From optimizing transportation routes to enhancing public safety, the possibilities of integrating AI technologies and data-driven decision-making systems within urban mobility processes seem endless. Yet, in this vast landscape of data-driven opportunities, lies a labyrinth of ethical complexities. What happens when these data are misused or fall into the wrong hands? What if privacy is compromised, leading to what we may experience as a surveillance dystopia? What about biases in algorithms inadvertently marginalizing certain communities or groups of people? Today, we are here to not to just discuss these complexities, but to navigate them together with our esteemed panel members that I will present along with the agenda. And we will focus on best practices and regulatory frameworks that assist developers in designing ethical systems for urban mobility data analytics. So, for those of you in the audience that are not familiar with the Emeralds project, Emeralds is a research innovation action under the topic of extreme scale data analytics. Its vision is to design, develop, and create a mobility analytics as a service toolset consisting of software components, software modules, reusable modules called the Emerald services. In this proof of concept version of this toolset, will enable urban mobility stakeholders to harness the untapped potential of extreme urban mobility data, utilizing computing resources across the computing continuum. So what will the Emerald's toolset specifically enable its users to do? These functionalities have to do with the collection and management of spatiotemporal data of high volume, velocity, and variety, the reduction of data ingestion times from myriads of devices by pairing these data streams with a storage querying analytics backbone, analyzing this data with real-time responsive AI machine learning algorithms, offering the capability to visualize results in interactive dashboards with enhanced visual analytics, and performing sensitive data analytics tasks in situ, which is also relevant and pertinent to what we are discussing today. So the motivation behind this webinar is to explore the ethical dimensions of AI tool design and see the links with the compliance with EU regulations such as the EU Data Act and the AI Act. Discuss this critical balance between privacy and legal frameworks governing the AI technologies and in the realm of real-world applications. Showcase the ethical considerations that are embedded in the Emeralds project and how we are shaping responsible AI practices in software development. Engage a dialogue on ethics and AI on data analytics. Highlight the importance of transparency, fairness, and accountability for these systems. So after this short intro, the first speaker will be Mr. Konstantinos Ntzoufas. He is a legal ethics advisor on AI and specialized in civil law. He will be discussing on AI trustworthiness and show us some key issues and ethical issues arising from the new EU AI Act that was voted last week. Then we will present the insights from a use case of the Emeralds project situated in The Hague and consisting of three topics: an ethical table process presented by Mr. Jeroen Steenbakkers, owner and CEO of ARGALEO, TU Delft human research ethics practices from the academic point of view, brought to us by Mrs. Sascha Lanser, which is a use case leader and work package leader on orchestrating whatever has to do with showcasing the algorithms and integrating them into endpoints in the use cases from TU Delft. And from the software development perspective, Mrs. Anita Graser, data science researcher from AIT, will position the ethics of mobility AI development. Finally, the second legal ethics advisor embedded in the Emeralds project, Mr. Fanos, also LLM in EU law, will present the Data Governance Act and GDPR considerations in the scope of developing Emeralds algorithms. At the end, we will have a short Q&A discussion. So thank you, and I think we can proceed with the first speaker, Mr. Ntzoufas. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Foivos, for your introduction. First, I have to apologize for having some technical difficulties, and I'm going to have to ask somebody from the panel to change the slides for me. Well, my presentation will be a general one. I hope it won't be too boring, but I think it will have some interest, given the fact that it will shed light on the latest amendments on EU AI Act, whereas my colleague, Mr. Fanos, which will speak at the end of the webinar, will elaborate and specialize, especially on the Emerald project. So the EU AI Act, can we move to the next page, please, Foivos, if it's possible? Okay, the new UA Act, as you see in the first slide, has been recently endorsed by European Parliament. Its final version on 13 March, and its approval is just pending by European Council. But in any case, is bound to come into force till the end of May, or at least at the beginning of June. The overarching characteristics of AI systems must be the trustworthiness and the human-centric character, which is a last time finishing touch to this legislation act. We have also to observe that there has been a serious shift in the definition of AI systems. As you can read on the slide, AI system means machine-based system, whereas at the beginning there was a reference to software systems, which are designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy, and they may, it's a big definition anyway, exhibit adaptiveness after deployment, and that for explicit or implicit objective. And the most crucial, that they can infer, the AI system may infer from the input it receives how to generate output such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. So the legislators have opted for a more sophisticated technology, neutral technology definition, which will also enable to engulf future developments on the one hand, but on the other hand, it will set a draw to more simple software systems. So the key features of an AI system in the UA Act is the autonomy, partial or total autonomy. That means that the AI system has to have a certain degree of independence and the main ability to infer from the input, not just automatic. We can move to the next page. As you may already know, although the procedure is onerous and has undergone, as I said, almost 808 amendments in the last 3 months, the UA Act has adopted a risk-based regulatory framework, providing in essence different, I could say, sub-regimes according to their classification of risk. So we may pinpoint 3 categories of risk of AI systems. First of all, the so-called prohibited or unacceptable AI systems. Those systems are especially those that are manipulative or those who use subliminal techniques in order to overcome the consciousness of a natural person, or social scoring such as Sesame in China, the very infamous AI system, or even some biometric systems. Those are totally forbidden. And here we can also spot a serious shift from previous draft to a hard stance towards the real-time biometric AI systems in publicly accessible places, where only exceptionally is permitted the use of these AI systems for searching of human trafficking and exploitation victims, and also in order to avert terrorist attacks. The second and the most, I could say, prominent classification is the already known high-risk AI systems. Those are systems, here we have also a change in definition, that they pose a significant risk of harm to the health, security, or fundamental rights of the person. So for those, they must meet a series of strict standards and requirements as they are set out in the relevant chapters. We can also say here that there are 2 subcategories of the high AI risk systems. The first is both of these categories is stipulated in the annexes of the AI Act, a vast and I could say a little bit chaotic AI Act. The first subcategory refers to systems covered by specific EU legislation, such as civil aviation, vehicle security, etc. Whereas the second, and we can move Foivos to the next page, relates to other risk systems listed in another annex, with the most prominent amongst them, AI used as safety component in critical infrastructures and educations, and the most emphatic example of AI systems used in recruiting workers. The interesting thing is that the latter can avoid the classification under certain circumstances, which are not here to be mentioned, but one could say if we prove that the system has an auxiliary role with regard to the human decision. All high-risk AI systems must be registered in the relevant EU database. And we have the third subcategory of minimal risk AI system, which is not explicitly mentioned in the AI Act. It is mentioned only in the recitals, and it refers to all the other systems that just create a low or minimal risk to individuals. And also there is the distinct case of general purpose AI models, whose main feature is the generality and their capability to independently perform wide range of distinct tasks. Here we can classify the famous ChatGPT and all these models of BARD. The interesting thing is that also providers and developers of GPAI must also comply with some obligations set in Article 43, amongst them the technical documentation and other requirements. Another interesting thing from a totally legal perspective is that in the last minute, whereas there was an insertion of general principles which would apply to any AI systems, this was omitted in the final version. These principles are already well known, and they have been established by the high expert group on AI. Still, there is a mention, there is a reference in the recital in AI Act, and it is the human agency and oversight, which means, as we all know, that AI must serve people, respect human dignity, and most of all, be overseen by humans, the technical robustness and safety, which equals to resilience against attempts to alter the usual performance of AI system, the privacy and data governance, a key element, compliance with GDPR, and with all the other relevant legislation, transparency, which foremost includes traceable and explainable AI, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, avoiding biases and promoting equality, and last but not least, social and environmental well-being. That means that we should also take into consideration when developing AI that we should do it in a sustainable and environmental friendly system. The conclusion is that they do have their significance in when drafting voluntary codes of conduct, which will apply to the other low-risk AI systems. I will make a brief and swift, albeit there are several pages, reference to requirements applicable to high-risk AI systems, albeit emeralds, at least till now, cannot be considered high-risk system. There are provisions which, amongst others, like Article 9 and 17 of OA Act, that provide for such systems that a risk management system as well as a quality management system must be established, and both aim at identifying the risks, evaluate, and also post-monitoring their consequences. Moving to the next page. Here we have the very prominent and of paramount importance key feature of legal and ethical also aspect of data governance and privacy. Article 10 is the article that caters for that. Amongst others, we should say that training, validation, tasting data which are used in AI sets shall be subject to appropriate data governance and management practices appropriate for the intended purpose of the AI system. And in parallel with that, we can see that the right to privacy and to protection of personal data, where we meet personal data, even anonymized data, must be guaranteed throughout the entire life cycle of the AI systems. So the principles of data minimization and data protection by design and default play also a pivotal role when personal data are processed. Moving to the next page, which is linked to what we said before. It is fair AI and combating with a B. I'm sorry for the error, grammatical error, against biases and discrimination in high AI systems. This is a key aspect of every tool, also in Emeralds. As we know, AI systems can perpetuate biases in data, thus leading to unfair and even outcomes and discrimination. So it's of high importance that the data, especially the training data that will be used, will have the appropriate statistical properties, which will rule out the possibility that certain biases, especially enshrined in historical data, will be averted. we have also the cases of feedback loops, and to make a small mention also regarding biometrical AI systems, it is strongly recommended when decisions have to be made that also the decision must be corroborated, it is mentioned in the results, by at least 2 natural persons, people. Also, worth mentioning is also the special provision of Article 10 that enables per exceptionem, exceptionally, to the providers of AI systems to process sensible special categories of personal data in order to detect from the start negative biases. Moving to the next page. Human agency and oversight, which is the first principle we could say. All systems, as we expect, shall be developed and used in order to serve people, and most of all to that in a way that can be appropriately controlled and overseen by humans. There are several already known governance mechanisms as human in the loop, human on the loop, and human in command. Especially human in the loop refers to the capability for human intervention throughout the entire life cycle of the AI system, and there is a special provision in Article 14 for high-risk AI systems. Moving to the next page. Also, accuracy, technical robustness, and safety of AI systems. These are topics that are already known. I won't waste your time anymore, but just to say that they are embedded in Article 15 of AI Act with regard to high-risk AI systems that should be designed in a way that it can achieve a level of accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. With regard to technical robustness, I have to point just one thing. We mean firstly, the resilience against attempts to alter the performance of the AI system, and also measures such as provisions for fail-safe plans when anomalies are detected in the system, so that the system can shut down if there is danger, is something also that should be taken into consideration. And also from a clear, not clear, I think it has also meaning, significance for you, the interplay with the underway to be enacted European Cyber Resilience Act is of importance, since amongst others it is foreseen that when an IA system complies with the Cyber Resilience Act, it will be presumed to comply also with the technical robustness and safety foreseen in the A Act. Next page. The accuracy, I don't have anything to say, you can read it, and we move to the next page. Transparency in high-risk AI systems. It's a key ethical and legal issue. A high-risk AI system should be designed in a manner to enable deployers to understand how the AI system works, to evaluate its functionality and comprehend its strengths and limitations. And in addition to that, appropriate information in the form of instruction of use should be handed over to the deployers. Here we have the also known problem of the black box algorithm, in which we have to compromise the robustness of the system with the requirement for transparency. Also not worth mentioning is the provision for special transparency requirements for AI systems in general, not differentiating, when they interact directly with natural persons. In such a case, natural persons must be informed that they are interacting with the AI system. Moving to the next page. There are some also, I have cherry-picked some additional noteworthy requirements and obligation over this AI Act. We have the obligation for technical documentation, so as to enable the auditing of the compliance of the AI system with the requirements of the AI Act. And in addition to that, it is coupled in the obligation for record keeping. That means keeping log files automatically throughout the life cycle of the AI system. Another topic is that that has been inserted the last minute is the requirement for AI literacy for all, regulatory requirement for all AI systems without differentiating between the different risk category. That means that all deployers of AI systems should take all measures to ensure to their best extent that their staff possesses the best level of education in operating AI systems and keeping up with the requirements. And last is the obligation for certain categories of deployers of AI systems, such as banks, police, and medical aid or fire brigade, which come to the rescue of some people, to draw up a FRIA, a special and separate fundamental rights impact assessment, which resembles to the BIA but has distinctive elements. Moving to the last pages, and I'm concluding with my presentation. It is clear that we have a new landscape, and still the ethic guidelines for trustworthy AI, which we mentioned before, keep their significance, especially for the AI systems that are categorized as low risk, or by they do not possess a legal binding nature soft law. And we have also to underscore the role of European harmonized standards for trustworthy AI that has great importance, since there have been already requests from the European Committee to SEN and SENELEC to prepare some blueprints. The theme is that when you comply with this standardization, then you will have a presumption that you are compliant with AI Act, and you can see that there are already some ISOs, but they are not fully compliant with the AI Act requirements. They comply partially. Moving to the last pages. There are also themes of, there are also topics of extraterritoriality and international private law issues of AI Act. Perhaps it's premature to make a reference to that, but we should just focus that there is a very wide, very broad scope of application of the AI Act. Amongst others, I could say that providers and deployers of AI systems, that their place of establishment or who are located in a third country, where the output is produced, even in that case, even if the output is used in the European Union, then the AI Act will apply. We have exceptions which refer to military and defense AI systems. Regarding the transmission of personal data, as is already known, we have to keep in mind the jurisprudence of Schrems 1 and Schrems 2 jurisprudence. And moving to the last pages. Last but not exactly last, the AI Act has to have the AI system have to have a green fingerprint, and that is stipulated in Recital 3. And also higher risk AI design must take into consideration the environmental impact. And ending with a liability product directive as regulatory counterpart for AI Act, which is not still enacted, but which foresees for the liability arising for damages stemming from the use of AI. It is not in its final version, but the most significant part of it is that it enables and aims at teasing at the burden of proof in favor of the victims, sorry, of the AI. So ending with the last page, the very vague conclusion. First conclusion is that the Act will create a new common ground in EU, but still many technicalities and also sub-themes are to be examined. European standardization organizations, as we've seen, are expected to have a pivotal role by providing standards which will constitute first safe harbors from legal perspective and ethical perspective of compliance with the AI Act. And of course, AI Act is not an insulated legislation and shall be always interpreted, and it will interact with other legislations as you Charter, GDPR, Cyber Resilience Act, Data Governance Act, which my colleague will make his presentation, will make also a reference, MDR, medical devices, etc. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Konstantinos. We could also mention the Digital Services Act on the
of course.
relevant
There are a lot of
landscape. So we will continue with the use case presentation and the three speakers, starting from Jeroen.
Forgive me for leaving due to personal reasons. I wish you the best to the webinar. Thank you very much for listening to me.
So Jeroen, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I will start sharing my screen now. Somebody can confirm that it's working. That's fine.
Yeah, it's working.
Very well. Good to hear. So, my name is Jeroen Steenbakkers. I am the owner of the company ARGALEO. We are a digital twin company who does a lot of data visualizations based on, let's say, geographical data, but also more and more real-time data. And today I will give you a short example on how we dealt with the ethical part of one of our, let's say, technical implementations. I will give you a brief introduction about the case, then I will tell you something about the product which we developed, about the process which we endured in the process which we went through in to deal with the ethical part, and then I will show you some lessons learned. It was quite a big project, so it's pretty hard to tell that in 10 minutes, but I will do my best here. In general, so as part of the Emeralds project, one of the use cases is doing crowd and traffic predictions on the Scheveningen area. And I'm not sure if everybody knows the Scheveningen area, but the Scheveningen area is one of the busiest beaches of the Netherlands. Approximately 10 million people visit the Scheveningen area for multiple purposes. So it's not only lying on the beach, but it's also shopping, going to events, to concerts, and there's also, let's say, local inhabitants who just simply go to the beach to walk around with their dog, for instance. So there's a lot of different functions there. But the other challenge is that Scheveningen, as it's lying near the beach, it's pretty difficult to at least come there by car, but also go home again. So there is a sort of a capacity issue with regards to crowding, but also traffic moving around. You could say that Scheveningen is getting too full, more or less, and this also results in, let's say, more and more incidental reports. So also the police has to intervene more and more in Scheveningen. So what they asked us to do, and this is also included in the Emeralds project, is to create a sort of a digital twin data dashboard, in which on the one hand we use a lot of open data available, but also connect to, let's say, local data sets. For instance, there are counting cameras on the boulevard, which we use to, let's say, get insights in the crowdedness and the amount of people which walk on the boulevard. And currently we are also using this data to do machine learning. Of course, it's a part of AI, but we develop machine learning algorithms to also start doing forecasts, the crowdedness. In general, I can say that all the data which we use is privacy proof. In the Netherlands, if you want to use, let's say, more or less, if you want to use data, get them from cameras, etc. It's very important that, let's say, the privacy is very well taken care of. So today, so for the meeting today, we have to assume that the privacy issue is taken care of very well due to GDPR implementation. nevertheless, the ethical side of this whole system is something we would we sort of discussed in a group panel. So what we did together with the municipality is we organized a sort of ethical table. This picture is not real because I was not allowed, as you can imagine, to use the real picture of because that would not have been very privacy proof. One of the key elements of an ethical table is that you actually agree with each other. Okay, guys, we're going to talk to each other. We are going to share information, but everything which is discussed does not leave the room on a personal basis, but leaves the room on a sort of a group basis. So this is a nice stock photo, as you can imagine, but it was not the real exercise we did. In order to, let's say, get a grasp on all the ethical side of the whole system and the use of the system, we use what they call begeleidingsethiek. That's a Dutch word, and the best word which I could find is more of a guidance ethical approach. And actually, the approach is stated here in Dutch, so I will translate it to you. And it consists of 3 phases. And phase 1 is, let's say, the explanation of the system. So I was invited as a system supplier. I was invited to explain what the system is doing, also what the system is not doing, how we deal with data, etc., etc. So everybody has the same idea of the context. The second thing is that in a dialogue together we said, okay, who are the actors in the system? What are our values and what are the positive and negative effects of the system? And eventually, in the third phase, with all the parties involved, we discussed, okay, how can we sort of set out measures or interventions to deal with the technological part, the surrounding part, and the usability part from the human perspective. And each of these phases I will describe now in the next sheets. What I forgot to tell you is that so the group in which we discussed these ethical topics consisted of as much stakeholders as we could get together. So there were more or less 40 people, and it was not only people from the police or from the municipality, it were also, let's say, the parking operators. It was also some people from the local, let's say, from the local inhabitants. So it were representative for the local inhabitants. There were property owners. There were people who were responsible for, let's say, the safety on the water. So we tried to get as much stakeholders together to discuss the system and, yeah, get, let's say, a sort of a 360 view on everything we discussed. So in the next sheet, I will take you through some of the, let's say, main results. As I imagined, or as I already said, it was a pretty big. In totally, we took 6 hours for this whole process. But I will take you to some of the main results. So first thing we did is we said, okay, so to whom this system is relevant? And yeah, of course you can read it, so I will not point them out all. But it's not only the municipality and the police. It's also about, let's say, event organizers. It's about visitors. It's about the property owners for the hotels, etc. So there's a lot of people involved here who indirectly, let's say, are influenced or indirectly get an effect of a too crowded beach or whatsoever. So together we stated that, and in the next process steps, we always also try to look from each of this perspective to the issue which we were discussing. Secondly, we discussed, okay, the system in general. What are the positive and the negative effects? Also here, you can read it. But in generally, I was pretty surprised that no, I was a little bit afraid that people were going to be sort of surprised of all the data we already have. You know, there's weather data available, traffic data, and since we connected, I was a little bit afraid that people were going to mention it as a what we call a big brother system. But in general, most of the people also sort of accepted and agreed, and this is what you can read in the positive effect, that this data, if you use it in the right way, it can also help in creating better safety, making better decisions, also doing, let's say, better interventions more earlier. So in general, these are the positive and the negative effects. Of course, on the right side, you will see it's about technology, it's about potential privacy issues, big brother effect. But what's important here, also from the ethical perspective, that you clearly state with everybody, okay, what are the positives and what are the negatives? Then, in order to better align, let's say, a sort of final advice on the system, we sort of stated, okay, what are the values we think are important in general, to which we want to reflect the system? And here you see all the values which we mentioned together. Nevertheless, we sort of accepted that we selected 4 of them, which of course safety is important, hospitality and livability and effectiveness. And in the next steps, based on these values, we sort of reflected our solution direction. This is too much text on the sheet. I recognize that, but feel free to read it, because in the end, what we did is that based on the values, based on the positive and the negatives, we were split up in 3 groups, and each group had the assignment to say, okay, looking at the technology, looking at the things we just discussed, what, let's say, consultation, what can we do about the technology to improve the system, to eventually improve the ethical values which we stated together. And here you see that, of course, on top of with technology is making all the data anonymize all the data, cybersecurity, maybe also choose to not use specific technology, etc. So here you see all, let's say, the real technical stuff which we can do and which we also sort of applied in the next version of the system. Second thing is looking at the environment. So given the fact that we have the technology, what can we do in the environment to cope with all the ethical values which we stated? And what you see here is that we discuss things about, okay, we can maybe improve the parking management. We can better communicate to the people. We can so we can give people early, let's say, notifications when they already plan to go to the beach, etc., etc. And on the right side, we looked at it from a people approach, saying, okay, what can people do to change and better cope with, let's say, the ethical part? And here you see that, of course, law and regulations can be adapted. We can do, let's say, more also from the, let's say, policy-related side. We can do stuff with parking, also better communication, and of course, we can also better train people to use the system. So in general, and these are more or less really practical, let's say, points which at some point somebody can really put into action as a result of a sort of an ethical evaluation process. So just to summarize this small example, in general, using this as, let's say, process methodology, I guess we could say it's a structured approach to deal with complex and subjective topics. I mean, ethics are, in general, a pretty subjective topic. There is no real black and white, but doing this, we were able to clearly point out what we thought was important and also point out some true actions. What I noticed in these processes, and that's also, it's a very important topic, that you all are, that you're aligned, that you're seeing people in a physical environment. And what I noticed also in this manner, because there will definitely, let's say, stakeholders who were not aligned or had different stakes in the environment, and there were also, let's say, not next to each other, but let's say, what you see here is that I noticed that there was a respect. If you can, let's say, if people talk about their feelings, and then the other people also respect each other. So being there on a physical level really also helped in understanding each other. What's important is that eventually all the, let's say, subjective parts were reported into a one general ethical report, which could also be shared with the back office and other, let's say, people who were asking about the system, right? So, and there were no names in it, but in general, the whole process was captured. So if somebody would ask, okay, did you talk about the ethics of the system? There was always a report which we could share. And lastly, and that was probably the most important one, we as a whole project team knew what to do to eventually improve the ethical side of the whole system. So because there were practical advices, which of course, some were easy to implement, others were more difficult, but at least we got an idea on what we need to do to improve the whole ethical side of the of our solution. And that's that. Hopefully, I clearly described in 10 minutes, this smaller use case, how we dealt with the ethical side of a, let's say, smart city system. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Jeroen, for the interesting insights on how collaborative sources can work on improving ethics considerations and guiding the development process and deployment of this kind of systems. We'll move on with Sascha Lanser from Delft. Will present us an academic point of view on how we can deal with this ethical challenges in the context of the university.
Thank you, Foivos. My presentation will be relatively short. What I will take you through in just 2 slides is something that I'm very happy about that we have at TU Delft. At TU Delft, we have what we call a Human Research Ethics Committee, the HAREC, which consists of...
Sascha, are you meaning to share the slides already?
Am I? My apologies.
No worries.
Okay. Then it should be working now. Sorry, my apologies.
All good.
Now you can see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, then I go back to the first sentence. Like I said, at TU Delft, we have what we call the Human Research Ethics Committee that consists of researchers from the different faculties and departments at TU Delft. Screening is mandatory for all research that involves human research subjects. So that means that if you want to set up an experiment, for example, want to collect data yourself, you need to come up with certain types of documents. And if you have prepared that well, you can get approval within 1 or 2 weeks, but it can also help you out to improve your research design and to make sure that it can be done in a privacy-proof, secure and ethical way. The HAREC works together with a privacy team at TU Delft, but also with data management services. And they have, like I said, a number of tools that can help you in planning, minimizing and managing possible risks that arise from research activities that we do at the university. Why am I happy about this? I know that some of my colleagues don't like it at all because it causes additional work. But once you understand the procedure, it can really help you. Like Jeroen says, when you have had the ethical tables, you have a report and you can always come back to that report if people from the outside have questions to you, but also it helps you think about what elements to cover to be sure that you do the research or the data collection or the implementation in a privacy-proof, secure and ethical way. The procedure that we have at TU Delft is similar. If I get questions from people in the outside world, for example, from the city of Scheveningen, I can always fall back on the fact that we have gone through this approval procedure. What does it in practice consist of? Like I said, it has some central elements. On the one hand, it's focused on minimizing risks. In a sense that all research potentially carries some risk if you're doing it in practice, and to be sure that you, as a researcher or research group, anticipate, mitigate, and minimize the risk for human research subjects. You have to communicate about potential risks. For example, you have to ask for informed consent, you have to explain about what you're going to do, but also elements like the ethical table that Jeroen has been talking about are elements of that. In a later stage, you also have to manage your risks while you're doing your research. And also in that respect, you have to think about it beforehand. And that falls down to 3 different stages. On the one hand, the design of your research. So take into account these different elements when designing your research. So there is, for example, a central risk planning tool that helps you manage the risk in these types of research. Also think about whether or not there might be risk with respect to the outcomes. Like I just said, informed consent, we always have to do that in the Netherlands in Dutch, but often we also do that, for example, in English. And if we also have other groups of people from other countries, we also have to translate that as well. And in the end, with respect to the managing of risks, we have beforehand to come up with a data management plan. Then we have the approval process from our ethical committee. And the most important thing is, and when I looked at it the first time, I really got scared. It's a tremendous long list of questions that you have to fill out. It asks you, for example, whether or not kids are involved in your research, whether or not people get paid for research, what kind of tools are being used to collect data, whether or not these were approved by the government, a whole list of things to think about. And again, for example, you have to show what you have been preparing with respect to informed consent, and also have to show your data management plan. And in the end, you have to apply everything that you have prepared beforehand when executing your research. I have to say that procedures like this and tools like this become more and more important. In this time of open science, open data, also journals ask you about the tools that you had in place to make sure that the privacy, the security, and the ethical elements of your research were covered. The last element is not that important, but what you can do if you have done research before and had the approval from the ethics committee. In these cases, you don't have to go through the process from step one, but you can simply work with amendments and explain what additional things you are going to do. But this gives me a basis, like I just said, when people that can either be from the media, it can be from local governments, people ask me whether or not I'm doing my research and adhering to all of the different terms. You heard part of them from the first speaker, but also when you look at the GDPR, for example, I can say with a clear heart that I do. And that makes, I think, doing research a lot easier and a lot nicer. And you also notice currently that if I can tell people that I have approval from Hague, that I also rely on that, and it makes it more easy to perform projects outside university. I have to say, like I said, I kept it really short, but it was more to explain to you guys that we have these tools available. I can, and I will in the chat, put a link that refers to the documents in English. So if you want to take a look at it or use parts of it, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Sascha. And moving onwards, I give the floor to Anita from AIP. Give us their insights on the design development of ethical mobility AI tools.
Thank you, Foivos. Thank you all for setting the stage so well. So I will take a couple of minutes to light some aspects of what the computer scientists who are now tasked to develop mobility AI should be considering with regards to ethics questions. And I want to touch on three main topics. The first one is energy, the second one is social consequences, and the third one is transparency. There are no clear borders between them. They leak into each other, as we will see in the upcoming slides. I encourage you to read the full article that I have linked below if you want to know more about these topics as well. So it's been in the news a lot, but just to refresh the numbers, those large AI models that are currently being developed, they use huge amounts of energy. We don't even necessarily know from the latest generations, such as GPT-4, how much energy they really use. We just know that even training relatively small models is easily spends more energy than, for example, flying from between continents on an intercontinental flight. And this is constantly growing because one strategy that is being pursued in making better AI is to just give it more training data, which means we need more computational resources. This is what can be referred to as the red AI approach. So you just throw more data, more computational power at the problem, and you hope that your AI model gets better by doing that, disregarding all the costs, energy-wise, society-wise. And the alternative to that approach is green AI, which we already heard earlier about. So this is an AI research approach where you take computational time and costs into account, and you try to reduce those costs while still achieving good results, which is, of course, a balancing act. And it's a balancing act on many different sides. So you can look at the software of how to make it more efficient. You can look at the hardware and use specialized hardware that is more efficient. You can look at where this hardware is located, where it is operating. Can you put it into regions where the energy mix is very green, where you have little carbon emissions related to the energy that you use? Or do you have to have it running in a place where that might not be the case? So through this whole spectrum, you can make multiple different decisions which influence how environmentally impactful your development is, your AI development. So we can look at the efficiency of how much energy is consumed to train a model. And of course, we also, in many cases, have to retrain models on a regular basis. It's not enough to just do it once. You have to find out how often is the sweet spot of retraining to get good results without wasting too much energy. It's also, of course, about how the energy is produced. So if you have a lot of solar, hydro, or wind, you will have less carbon output from your AI development than with fossil fuels. So it matters which data centers we do use, not just for data protection, which has been talked a lot about, whether we need to use data centers in the EU or it can be anywhere globally, is on the one hand side a data protection issue, but it's also an issue with regards to what is the energy mix in the different regions. And this also bleeds into the social consequences. So where these computing centers are located, they use energy and they use water and they use other resources which are not available for other uses. So if we just put it somewhere where we think, oh, there's a lot of green energy there, we gobble up all this energy, we gobble up all the water, we basically decide that the people there now have less water and less energy to use, which might result in higher energy prices for them or in trouble with their water supply. So we don't just have to evaluate the benefits and the risks for the population, like in Scheveningen, which we saw before, but we also have to think about the models and the software that we use. Does it have an impact on people somewhere else? The people who live close to the compute facilities, or the people, for example, to help label the training data, which is quite often still a manual process. And you probably heard in the news that that is often outsourced to the global south, which is another huge social issue of AI development. We heard a lot already about privacy. So in the context of mobility data privacy, of course, there's a lot of crucial and sensitive information if you have data on an individual basis, like the home location, the workplace, some habits that you have. So it is really important to apply appropriate data protection measures to avoid the leakage of those data, so that the tools on one hand side can still pick up the knowledge on the general population, but without endangering the individual. So what can we do? There are many different approaches. I have listed two ones like on here. The one is local differential privacy, which allows the individual to protect their data. So this on the technological side means that on the individual's data collection device, the tools add noise to the data, which ensures that the data is protected and anonymized sufficiently before sharing it with any central trusted aggregator. The second approach is the global differential privacy or just differential privacy, there the data is collected by a trusted entity, and the trusted entity then ensures that it aggregates the data in a way that ensures that no individual can be identified from the published data set anymore. And this is quite a common approach used to train machine learning models or to create even synthetic data based on what we have collected to ensure that we can still have all the patterns that we need to train the models without endangering anyone's privacy. Another important factor that was mentioned already in the first presentation is explainability and avoiding black boxes. So one of the focuses in Emeralds from the AI research side is to look into how can we explain these models. We're looking at the state of the art, such as LIME, for example. I have brought here one example of how this can look like for the Scheveningen use case, where we try to predict which days certain locations get particularly full. And this is the state of the art of how you can tell the user why the model is making a specific prediction. For example, because of the weather, because it's a holiday, because on the previous days it's also been super busy, so we think it will be super busy again, by really giving the decision makers, which are the humans in the end, information about why the model thinks certain things might be happening. It doesn't take any automatic decisions, of course, but this is to really avoid this black box and just this, computer says no effect that we really need to avoid with AI. This plays into the whole topic of transparency, but also on the scientific side, we have to be transparent about all the things that go into developing a model. How much training time does it need? How sensitive are all the parameters? Is it still stable if I change small things? Which hardware have I used, and what's the potential of pre-training models? All these things should be reported, and not just the accuracy of the model. Because is it worth to spend a year's worth of computing just to have 0.1% higher accuracy? Maybe in some applications it is, in many others it won't be. So also in the scientific community, there is this need of being more transparent about all these things to really be able to find the trade-offs that are worthwhile, and that we put the resources where they are actually needed and where they can have the most positive effect. So one downside that we have to be transparent about is explainability approaches are also very resource intensive. So this is definitely something to keep in mind. You are not just training the model itself, you're also computing the explanations. So the situation is complicated, isn't it? In conclusion, Emeralds is really exciting from the AI research perspective on multiple fronts. We've heard a lot about the data and about the privacy protections that are necessary. We also have the whole topic about mobility AI, because it's in the real world and things are changing. The models will have to be retrained quite frequently to remain relevant. So this is another thing which plays into the energy usage that we discussed. We also have to think about who profits and who has to carry the burden of our whole developments. And of course, we have to ensure that we don't run into black boxes, and that the models that we develop are actually trustworthy, explainable, and understandable by the people who have to make the decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And now we proceed with Ntzoufas, ethics advisor to the Emeralds project and law consultant in AI issues. Ntzoufas, I will be sharing your presentation. Whenever you're ready, you can.
Yes, please. I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you very much, Foivos, for handing over. So, just a minute. Okay. Can everybody see the presentation? I suspect yes. So, thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be within the this teleconference and within the researchers that are in whose competence is the development of AI algorithms. from my point of view, as well as from Konstantinos' view, who spoke first, we are exposed to a review process on which we have feedback on the latest or the later stages of development. And this is important because as we don't have a technical background and we are learning together with us reviewing the algorithm, we are sometimes surprised by the possibilities and the options that technology gives in order for all of the guidelines for ethical AI advancement and algorithm development to be forwarded. So if there is any, how should I say, mistake regarding our technical background, please forgive it. We, Konstantinos and me, are coming from the field of law, and we are trying to make amends for it by being very inquisitive and trying to follow up with all the technological process. In forwarding the presentation, will have to say that I'm very pleasantly surprised by the technical approach that I have heard in the presentation here. I feel that there is an adequacy, let me formulate it that way, in a very, very impressive level on the roles that have been already delegated. So we were expecting, me and Konstantinos as AI ethics advisors, that the adequacy would be there regarding data protection, because we were also informed about the DPOs that are involved, as well as for the ethical committees of the actors involved. But we see that in practice, and this is very, very encouraging. So I'm going to very quickly cover Data Governance Act and GDPR in the scope of Emerald's utilized algorithm development. This is supplementary to the presentation that Konstantinos had about the AI Act. And as said, this is seen and expanded from our field of view, which is not of technical nature. So what we are confronted with, up to now, we are confronted with data sets that are explicitly a part of, they have anonymized data. Weather information, bridge openings, incidents, roadworks, e-tickets validation data, public transport route list, as well as data sets anonymized or declared as anonymized with a probability of private identifiable information exposure. This would be the event calendar of Scheveningen, the parking data, the public transport data, and so on. So what we usually do is, after this meticulous process that all of the actors have gone through, and we've had quite a good idea up to now on what procedure this involves, we're just checking first on a high level, and where it is needed from our side, deeper into probable, let's say, contrast to the guidelines that we are exposed to as legal advisors, especially per the wording of the legislative instruments. So quickly, because there are a lot of misunderstandings to people that are, of course, not familiar with the subject, there is GDPR, there is Data Governance Act, and there is the AI Act. GDPR has a scope most of you are already familiar with. Data Governance Act enables data sharing, mainly making data available for reuse, and facilitates data sharing between businesses and governments. And something that has to be said here is that something very important is that the sovereignty on both the product of the AI process as well as on the feeding data, on the training data themselves, is something which is very important and will be highlighted during the next years, because a lot of the processes that people not involved with governmental actors are happening through AI programs which are situated overseas, either in the US, Canada. So the sovereignty of both the algorithm as well as the data is something which is important and will be highlighted. About the AI Act, Konstantinos has told you it proposes a risk-based regulation and guideline. So GDPR in the context of AI, From the content of the presentation up to now, I feel that the speakers are already very familiar with the GDPR. I'm not going to bore you with expanding everything that has been talked about. I'm just trying to highlight what is the way that we use GDPR as ethics advisors in order to have first a high-level overview of what we are presented with, mainly the DMPs, and later with the product of the DMPs as the process goes. So we have a GDPR is, as known, the cornerstone of data protection laws in the EU. Key principles are consent and right to access. We have had up to now in the other presentations a very good overview of how the researchers are always ready to answer when was consent given, for which reason, and they are ready both to answer questions on the consent itself, as well as to sufficiently answer any right to access request. There are rules for transferring data outside of the EU. This is something which is important, but in the use cases up to now, it is not evident that such option has to be reviewed. So, Data Governance Act, in the context of AI developers and researchers, DGA promotes data sharing, enables access to protected data, which is restricted, fosters trust in data intermediaries, supports innovation, and is part of the EU's data strategy. There is the scope of DGA is to be applied both on the development of AI algorithms as well as on the sharing of the product on the deliverable that will be given at the end. So it is important to have an idea of what is DGA, the Data Governance Act, applied to, both during the process of collecting data, feeding the data to the algorithm, as well as to reproducing the algorithm, either the open source part or probably some of the not open source parts, the proprietary parts, under sufficiently explained licenses, so that all actors, both the involved ones as well as the not involved ones, but certainly for which it is beneficial, do get the maximum benefit of it. So GDPR versus AI Act, distinguishing the focus. GDPR focuses evidently on data protection and privacy, whether AI Act takes a risk-based approach. The AI Act classifies AI systems based on their level of risk to regulate them accordingly, with high-risk systems facing more scrutiny. It has been said that the use cases that we are talking about are difficultly recognizable to be associated with high-risk approaches. However, the AI Act, as Konstantinos told you earlier, is still in a very finite drafting, but it is still to be discussed. The text itself is huge. It's more than 450 pages. So I think that a lot of executive legislative instruments will have to be issued, as well as are already on the pipeline of being issued, in order for interpretation to happen. GDPR has wider applicability than AI Act, but here, for the use cases relevant to our discussion, there are a lot of intersections, of which we have had quite a good description before. So, GDPR's data protection obligations, I'm not going to expand on it because I will be reducing time from Q&A. This is thing that most of, certainly all of the speakers, as well as most of the audience, is well exposed to. Integrating Emerald's datasets for AI, FAIR principles at work. Just as an example, datasets 3 and 4 regarding public transport and shared mobility demonstrate integrating diverse mobility data to enrich AI inputs. Otherwise, there would be reason to expand a bit on it, but I think that Anita has very well expanded on it, on all the questions that present themselves regarding mobility data, as well as how the caution that needs to be exercised regarding GDPR has to be combined with energy efficiency, both at the time of collection, at the time of feeding data to algorithm, as well as at the time of re-exercising, retraining the algorithm. Interoperability. Unified data models enable AI systems to efficiently process diverse data sets. This is something that outside of the ethics guidelines on a personal level or in a level pertaining to humans, to persons, it is important also because of energy savings that might come in hand. And accessibility. API interfaces ensure accessibility of datasets in line with FAIR principles. This is also once more pertaining to energy not being lost because of models being in need of accessing data through platforms that are going to be energy non-efficient or energy intensive. So, DGA's data sharing frameworks. The DGA establishes frameworks to facilitate the sharing and reuse of certain categories of data across sectors in EU member states. This includes provision enabling access to and reuse of public sector data under specific conditions. Beyond AI regulation, introducing Data Governance Act, explaining data sharing mechanisms, and discuss impact on EU economy. These are all guidelines, and these are all themes that are somebody can be exposed to when reading the DGA. And as said, this is something that the DGA is going to regulate, because there are intersection of the regulating scope, both at the time of collection of the data as well as at the time of sharing of the deliverables. I don't know if you will have any questions regarding the mechanisms that DGA foresees. Anyhow, I think that since we will have deliverables which will be tangible at a later point of the project, a lot more also tangible options can be discussed regarding DGA application. Its contribution is facilitating data sharing and reuse, supporting data intermediaries, and encouraging data altruism. So the mechanisms to foster a responsible data sharing and power innovation across the EU are there. Some will need to be interpreted through other legislative means. At this time, the way that, once again, the deliverables that are going to be produced are going to have very distinct open source parts and proprietary parts, and how easy the open source parts will be available for different governments exposed to different levels of knowledge, different levels of know-how, and probably different levels of exposure to the language used at the primary model. This is something that needs to be taken into account for the deliverable to be perfectly usable in all of EU. Data governance challenges with sensitive data sets. This once again has been talked about. Mobile app counting data anonymization. There is one data set, for example, which has potential for future sharing, but it raises questions on maintaining anonymity and consent when scaling or integrating data. Without being now very specific, we are just going to have, I will expand on a question that we had as ethics advisors, which is pertaining to the extent to which data sets that are used for training the algorithm and can be retrievable so that somebody checks if the algorithm has been trained correctly, if used or combined with other data sets, probably both of which or all of which, in case there are more than two, have anonymous data, might lead to personal identifiable information, private identifiable information, and thus may lead to first problem regarding ethics, the identification of individuals, which according to the consent that has been at a former stage has been excluded to the one who has given the consent to the data subject, as well as to the bias in the training algorithm. So on a practical level, when we as ethics advisors with our legal background are exposed to the explanation of a deliverable being very simple but very effective, we try to think of examples whereby the bias is for sure decided as absent or reviewed as absent, and we try by examples to make sure that the guidelines regarding the risk-based approach are followed, so that the legislative instruments are certainly as per their guidelines taken into consideration. DGA's data access and use, share of reusable data covered, innovation boost from open data, cross-border data flows, and data market growth. These are all targets of the DGA once it is well applied. So this on a second basis is something that after we have reviewed the deliverables, we take also into account. Also in the previous presentation, there has been considerable reference to, for example, energy as such as an asset to be a compass for ethical AI development. The DGA enables responsible AI development. Some closing words about the Scheveningen case. The Scheveningen event calendar provides data on upcoming events. The data helps predict mobility demands during events. The DGA mandates data quality checks, ensures integrity of event calendar data used by AI systems, and the DGA once again enables secure cross-border data sharing. According to what we have seen in the previous presentation, we see that all of the primary data, of the data that is fed to the AI algorithm, is up to now fully sufficient in order to cover these guidelines. So there is no need to expand more on this. The Scheveningen data as collected and as used by the algorithm, it's sufficiently compliant. Regarding the GDPR compliance strategies, once again, I would not like to take time from the Q&A session because it has been more than evident that GDPR compliance has been taken into account regarding the Scheveningen data collection project. Regarding the data sets, it is evident that they comply with the GDPR unless PII is exposed otherwise. We have provided an example, and it is once again evident that personally identifiable information may be exposed by the intersection with other data sets being evident. So by finishing here, I will try to compare Data Governance Act and GDPR so as for the compliance regarding this. The case of not explicitly anonymized datasets regarding anonymization, access controls, personal data, recommendation, legal guidance, and training. All these two regulative instruments will have to be reviewed as per their intersections as well as per their exclusive and exclusive scope, so that all of them are invoked at the end of our job as ethics advisors, only for ethics issues, not for data protection issues, because these have been covered by the DPOs who are involved in the data collection. So they will need to be explicitly referenced to our latter stage ethics reviews so as to show if all of the guidelines are followed in the deliverables. So concluding, a holistic approach to AI and data in the EU is followed or is intended to be followed from our side. We need to adhere to GDPR. We need to follow the DGA on both a specific level as well as on a macroeconomic and macropolitical level. And we have to respect individual rights, both at the very primary stages of development as well as at the end. So by following GDPR, DGA, and the AI Act, we can build trustworthy AI that respects rights and manages risks. So this is it. Thank you very much. I hope I have not been boring you with a lot of details. And if you happen to want, we can pass to the Q&A session.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the interesting and concluding presentation. We have only 5 minutes for the Q&A. Maria Letizia.
Yeah, Foivos is, yeah, it's very short time, but it's fine because I mean, I want to thank all the the speakers. Their presentation has been, have been very, very interesting today. We have a couple of questions that probably we cannot miss. One is a question that arrived from a person in the audience. Can you provide examples of specific ethical guidelines or principles that guide the development of AI tools within the Emeralds project? Probably is something that could be addressed by Anita, I guess.
Yes,
yeah.
Of course. So in my presentation, I had the example of how we address the question of trustworthy AI through explainability. Another technological approach that we use to conform with the guidelines is to minimize the data that is needed to be shared. We approach this by exploring the potential of federated learning, where the machine learning models are trained very close to where the data is generated, so that the data does not have to be collected in a central place and disseminated between multiple stakeholders. So that is just another example of how we, from a technological side, with new AI developments, can help comply with these guidelines.
Thank you very much, Anita. Yes, there is also another question, which is half a question and half suggestion and the consideration from the audience. First of all, thank a lot for this webinar. He says, recently enrolled PhD, National Doctorate in Learning Sciences and Digital Technologies in Italy. Recently, I'm working on AI ethics, act and regulations, integration to university platform for teachers and students' performance enhancement. Please, can you suggest some good references for study? So this is a question from the audience. I say that, first of all, I suggest to follow Emerald's project, because we will have other webinars to, and you can follow our working timeline for that. And if some of the speakers want to add something, please. Some of you has some suggestion?
Sascha, Konstantinos, I would suggest having a look on the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence from the EU that continuously releases some interesting policy documents and suggestions on integrating AI compliance guidelines into research. But I guess Nasos and Konstantinos have more solid answers on this.
Foivos, if you allow me, I will be very short. The question is very good. The answer, if it will be given, it will be open-ended and can be huge. In a very, very short matter of time, I would say the place to begin is not the text of the AI Act proposal, but the recitals. This means the introductory remarks. Just for you, Mr. Amin Nadim, to have an idea, it is said between EU legal consultants that whatever reaches the recitals but does not reach the text of a regulative instrument, for example, an act, is the most challenging part that didn't have full political consent in order for it to be included in the legislative text per se. So I think that a very good way to have an introduction of what is or what are challenging aspects and what are all what was the political background that was guiding towards the legislative text as it is in the draft is found in the recitals. So in one word, the recitals of the AI Act. This is where I would begin.
Perfect. I think now we can close today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. We experienced and explored some best practices, some information from regulatory frameworks and real-world strategies that can be utilized to ensure that innovation in urban mobility data analytics is not just effective, but also ethical and responsible. And I think the key takeout today is that we need to remind ourselves that with technological advancements and innovation comes an even greater responsibility towards society. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you to the audience for joining us.
Much to everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. Just to remind you that the slides will be available for the audience after the webinar, and the recorded video also will be fundable on the website of Emeralds. So follow us on the social media channels and on our website, and have a lovely day to everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye.